Hello and welcome. So today we're going to spend a little time just simplifying and understanding this amazing world of strategies. And the reason we do that is because once we understand the strategies, in other words, the way that we run our life, it gives us far more control over the way that we operate in the world. It gives us far more connection and it helps us to achieve our goals much better. So let's explore strategies, understand strategies, and explore how we begin to understand other people's strategies. So the first question is very simple, and that is, what is a strategy? A strategy in the world of NLP is a series of internal representations that routinely lead to the same outcome. In other words, it's a series of internal representations that run in our head, and every time it runs, it ends up with the same outcome. And there are a vast number of different strategies. You'd be surprised to know, possibly, that in our everyday life, we run strategies from the moment we wake to the moment that we fall asleep. And those strategies cover a whole raft of areas. For example, I wake up in the morning, I go into the bathroom, I wash my face, I brush my teeth. I will do it in exactly the same way, in exactly the same order every morning. Okay? I go downstairs, I make myself some coffee. I will make that coffee in exactly the same way every day. When I shave, when I dress, when I prepare to go out to a meeting, I do it in exactly the same order. You put your socks on in the same order, you put the same leg in your pants, the same order. These are all internal strategies. We have strategies for the way that we are attracted to other people in our lives, for the way that we attract friends, for the way that we attract relationships. We have strategies for the way that we motivate ourselves. For some people, we even have strategies for the way that we get sick. Buying and decision making are two key strategies that we run almost every single day of our life. Whenever you go out to buy something, you run a strategy. When you make decisions about things, you run strategies. So these strategies it's not just some fancy notion, it's actually core to the life of every human being, that we are running these things in our heads. So what I want to do is to just explore how we can identify a person's strategies, how we can annotate them, and what we can do with that. Because you see, one of the core beliefs is that all strategies are useful at some time. And eventually you may find that a strategy no longer works for you. So it's a bit like a business plan, really. Sometimes your business plan works for you for a while and then it stops working for you. So what do? You change the plan. So it is with strategies. If a strategy is not working, sometimes it's necessary to have a look at that strategy, tweak that strategy, and in doing so, pretty much create a new one. So let's look at how we do that. Our internal representations for the strategy are also geared to our external behavior. So we have internal process, external behavior. And it breaks down through the modalities. So we have visual, in other words, the things that we see. We have visual internal, so those are the pictures we have in our head. We have visual external, those are the things that we see out there. So for example, if I'm going out to buy a new shirt, I may have an image in my head of the shirt I'm looking for, and I'm going to compare that with what I see out there until the two match up. Auditory is about internal and external. So internal auditory would also be, for example, the sounds that we hear in our head. So how can I give you an example of that? Imagine a piece of music which you hear externally, auditory external, and imagine a piece of music that you listen to in your head. That would be the auditory internal. There's also the kinesthetic internal, and that is about emotion and sensation. and kinesthetic external, which is about tactile, touch, feeling. And the one that isn't on here, which I'm going to add now, is what we call auditory digital. Auditory digital is the internal dialogue. It's the conversation that we have with ourselves in ear. So let's look at how we can actually annotate this as we go. I'm going to use an example, okay? As an example, I'm going to go out and look for a new suit. One of my favourite strategies because I love going out to buy a new suit. So I want to introduce you to this process. It's called the tote. T-O-T-E. This is going to become important because this is the way that our strategy is going to work. We're going to start with the first test or trigger, as some people call it. And that trigger is what you have as your initial criteria for choosing. So I will have an initial criteria in my head for the suit that I'm going out to buy. The O is for operate, which is the strategy that I'm going to run. The second T is for the test, and the test is where I compare what I've got with what I set out to find, and the exit is when I go, yay, new suit, and I go home and explain why I spent £300 on a new suit. So let's talk through that. So our first trigger is a visual internal. So my visual internal is that I have in my head an image of the suit that I am going out to buy. So let's imagine for a moment that this is a dark blue pinstripe two-piece suit. So that's my first test or trigger. Cool. So I go out to, let's say I go out to the shopping mall, and what I'm doing then is I'm doing a visual external while I'm looking for the store where I know I want to look for that suit. When I find that store, I go into the store, I go to the menswear department, so I'm still doing a visual external, and I look around the menswear department until I find the suits on the rack. There, I spot a dark blue two-piece suit. Okay, so I've got an initial test. Yeah. I then carry on running that strategy. So the first thing I do, this is me, remember, is I do a kinesthetic external. I feel the material because what I'm actually searching for is a good quality material. As I feel that material, a little voice in my head says, yep, that feels good. So then what I do is a visual external which says, have you got my size? 42-inch chest, short cut, 34-inch waist, 29 inside leg. Okay? That's my check. Yes, they have. So I take it off the rack, I go into the fitting room, and I try it on kinesthetic external. When I try it on, a little voice in my head says, that feels good, that feels good. I look in the mirror, visual external, and then a little voice in my head will say one of two things. It will either say, no laughing, it will either say, hey, you look good in that, or it will say, nah. Okay? If that little voice says, hey, you look good in that, I then, only then, do I do the next visual external, which is, I look at the price. Okay? I look at the price I ask myself, is that value for money? Is that value for money? If all of this matches, now I go to my final test, which is a visual external, a kinesthetic external, and the AD, which says, looks good, feels good. Little voice says, that's the one, and then I exit. So that is my strategy. If here, that little voice says, no, that doesn't quite look good, what I will do is I will exit out from that, and I will go to another visual external, and I will look for a similar style, similar colour, and I will then begin to run it again. Okay? If necessary, I will exit that store and run it again. So that is what we call a loop out, because that will allow me to loop out and back in again at the appropriate point. And I learned that loop out because all too often I put a suit on, looked at it, said, nah, but maybe. And then I'd buy it, I'd take it home, and the first time I put it on, I'd think, I'm not so sure now. And I'd put it back in the cupboard and wear something else, and put it back in the cupboard and wear something else. Before I know it, it's too late to take it back, and I've spent a lot of money on a suit that I'm not going to wear. So that is the loop out that allows that strategy to work. So I've got the initial trigger, which is there. I've got the running of the strategy with a quick test in there, a full test in there, and then I've either got the exit or I've got the loop out. And that is my buying strategy. Now, why is this important? Think about it. If you're a sales professional and you can understand the buying strategy of your prospective customer, you present your product to them in such a way that it dovetails with their strategy. That way, it's almost like you put them into a maze and there's one way in and there's only one way out. And that way out is the order path. Because there is no... I heard someone actually describe them as lab rats at one time, where you guide people through the process so that they can do that. So that, in effect, is how you elicit, annotate a strategy. Now, if there is a problem in this strategy, it's quite simple. All you do is you can install the loop out. And the way that you install the loop out is to first you annotate it, then you find where it's not working. Once you identify any area where it might not be working, you can sit down, literally rewrite the strategy, and then you can take that strategy and reinstall it into the person. Now, this is my way of doing it. If you're going to elicit a strategy with someone else, you do it thus. First of all, you want a good level of rapport. And the reason you want a good level of rapport is because you're going to ask them a lot of questions. So first of all, make sure you have the rapport. Make sure that both you and the person you're eliciting the strategy from are clear about the outcome. Okay? That is what's in it for them, what's in it for you, so that you both understand. You're then going to map their internal representation. So the way that you'll do that is you will literally, as well as asking a number of questions, you will observe their eye movements. We've all done eye movements as part of our NLP journey. So what are you looking for? You're looking for the visual recall. Yeah? You're looking for visual construct. you're looking for auditory recall, you're looking for auditory construct, you're looking for kinesthetics, and you're looking for auditory digital. So as you begin to ask them the questions, you watch for the eye movements that show you congruence with what they're saying. If at any stage you notice there's an incongruence between what's going on here and the words that are coming out, it could be one of two things. One is that they have missed something, in which case you have to just do a timeout, rewind them and say, okay, can we just go back over that again to make sure that I'm clear? And then go in with your microscope and literally ask a few more questions. Now be careful that you never say, so what are you seeing, what are you hearing, what are you feeling? Ask them, so what's going on in your head? How are you recognizing? How are you understanding? Because the last thing you want to do is to say, what are you seeing? Because that will then lead them to actually look for something, rather than give you what's actually going on. The other thing that might happen is that someone gives you a kinesthetic clue at the same time as their eyes do a visual. What you may have going on there is a synesthesia, which is where two things happen at the same time. Now if you have a synesthesia, that's not a bad thing. It's just that you need to be aware of it, so that if you need to do anything with that strategy, if you need to make any changes, you need to understand whether or not you need to unwire that synesthesia. Because if that synesthesia is a cause for that strategy not working, then maybe you just need to unwire that. We'll talk about that in another session. So what you're doing is you are observing, you're asking lots of questions, keep going back, recovering, going back, recovering. What I tend to do when I'm doing my modelling processes with corporate clients is I actually sit and interview the client, and I will have a video camera running. And the reason I do that is because A, I'm getting a verbal and auditory recording of the whole process, and B, I can play it back later and I can observe those eye movements very carefully and match them up with the notes that I've got, so I can cross-reference what I'm doing. Okay? So report the outcome, observe the eye movements, listen, recap, reload, and you can even feed it back. You know, people are fascinated, I find, to actually understand how their brain works. I did a series of these things for an organisation a few years ago where we were modelling their top leaders, and their top performing leaders were fascinated when I said to them, how would you like to know psychologically why you are as good as you are? And they played ball for as long as I wanted them to in order to find out what's going on here. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you annotate and discover the strategy. Now, to reinstall the strategy, it's very simple. We've already talked about eye movements. You can use forced eye movements based on EMDR, and you can actually reinstall a strategy by talking them through it as you force the eye movements. That's one option. The other option, if you are that way inclined, is to write a metaphor, have them close their eyes, do a little gentle trance work, and then literally tell them the story. Talk them through the process, almost as if they were doing it in their sleep, and that will install it for them. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is strategies. Have fun, I always do.